Do you and your spouse have a healthy sex life? First and foremost, I want to talk about what does that look like individually for each couple, because I do believe that's different for everybody. Now, there are some generalities about relationships and husbands and wives and men and women that we can apply here, and I'll share a few of those. But I do want you to take time to really think about your own personal journey in this thing called marriage, because my journey will not look like yours, but I do want to share with you a few tips or a few things that I've learned after being married for 27 years and being surrounded by other married people that many of us struggle with, particularly the difference between men and women when it comes to sex. Now, as women, we go through a lot with our bodies, and sometimes our spouses can receive that as rejection. But I think it's important that we start sharing with them and then putting them in a room or around other couples so they know that it's not my wife's issue or problem or my wife rejecting me, but this is some real things that women go through. So I'll just share from my personal life some of the issues I faced earlier in my marriage. Now, when my husband and I first got together, we were like rabbits, as most are. But as I got a little older, getting, not even older, just I remember there was a birth control that I was on that literally like killed my sex drive. And what you have to understand is I had a doctor tell me that that wasn't possible. And I kept saying, listen, something is wrong. I am literally, when my husband touched me, I am about to fall into tears. Like I'm crying. It grosses me out just for him to touch me. And I love this man. So something is wrong. But I had this one doctor, she was telling me it couldn't be the birth control. But thank God I went to a different doctor, and he, interestingly enough, a man, he says it's absolutely the birth control because it lowers our testosterone, which causes the sex drive. So if you have had a high sex drive and you're on birth control and all of a sudden it has dropped, you may want to get that checked out. So don't think it's something wrong with you. Could be the medicine that you're taking. So another thing that most women go through, particularly I remember through the ages of the 30s, and I didn't have my children until I was in my 30s, but some of my friends we was kind of going through the same thing. Well, we had children now, and our sex drive had really changed. But it wasn't because we didn't desire our husbands. And we certainly recognize in our conversations that something must be wrong with us. Like we would say that, and I don't think there was anything wrong with this, but we would say something is wrong with us because we're in our 30s and our husbands want more than what we can offer. Now, I don't use these things as excuses. I'm using them as acknowledgement. One, so the woman who's listening to this will not feel like she's alone. And two, for the man who may listen to this, you will realize that your wife is not intentionally withholding from you, but our bodies go through so much. And so as a young mom, where you have these two people who just grab on you, pull on you for everything, need you for everything, our husbands can feel like another chore. Now, I know that's not right. It's not fair to him, but it does feel like that. So I encourage you, if you're in that stage with being a young mom, where the children are, between the ages of newborn and like 4 years old, where they need you for everything, where they think you are the source of their life, and it feels like you are. Get help. Don't be afraid to schedule in date time where you're saying, okay, mom, if you have their grandparents there or a friend, I need help. I need someone to come get the kids, take them away. And I know during that time you may want to rest, but give yourself time to find a way to restore, but get reconnected. Sex is so important in our marriages because it does create a level of intimacy that other things can't, right? So here's the thing I learned over my years of being married and my journey and my research of women and men is that a lot of times for women, we need the conversation. We need the connection through conversation to make us feel the desire to be intimate. Where men can be the complete opposite. They need the intimacy to open up. Now, why God would create it that way, I don't know. But what we have to do is be willing to give each other grace. So husbands, if you need your wives to be a little bit more responsive in the bedroom, find out her love language and really speak to that. And wives, we have to do the same thing. We cannot speak to our husbands from our love language. Like my love language is quality time. My husband's love language is touch and feel. So I can't think just because we spent a lot of time together that I fed into his tank. He wants me to hold his hand. to rub his neck, to touch him, where I don't particularly need all of that. I do need quality time, and that quality time needs to be us talking, communicating, laughing together, doing something cool together. So, what is your love language, and are you using those things to help you draw to one another so that you can have the intimacy sexually that you desire? So, make sure you make it an effort to do that, especially when you have the little ones, because they can really make you feel disconnected because all your attention goes to them. The second thing you may want to begin to look into, so we talked about how it could be medicine and hormones in those early years, and how your children can be a source to pull you guys apart. But we want to make sure you stay together. Another thing that affects our sex life that we don't talk about a lot is our childhood traumas. So if you've ever experienced any type of childhood trauma that maybe you haven't dealt with, particularly sexual childhood trauma, and maybe for a while it was able to hide, so it didn't seem like it was, you may have thought maybe I've gotten over it. But being in a constant relationship with your husband and wife, I believe that marriage is meant for healing. Like God created marriage that we may heal, but the only way he can heal a thing in us is to reveal it. So if your trauma, your childhood trauma, it's now your mind is going to things that happened to you as a kid, and it's causing you to shut down or withdraw from your spouse and make you feel like, wow, if I tell them, if they know these things, they won't really love me. That's what God wants to heal. So in order to get back to that level of intimacy, that reconnection, I encourage you to go somewhere and get help for that trauma. Find someone, a therapist, maybe a coach, if you believe your coach can help you really go into those places. And the thing about trauma, one, it needs to be witnessed. So when we experience something traumatic, when we can have someone to share, to talk to them about it, someone to witness our trauma, meaning that they just create a space to hear what we are going through. And they create a safe space where there's empathy and compassion, not judgment or necessarily even advice. That's an environment for healing. Another thing we have to do is we need an opportunity to reframe what we've been through. We need to allow our brains and our minds to rewire the story the way that it was. That's not to say to deny what happened. That's not to say to change what happened by saying new words, but to recognize that there's nothing we can do about what has happened. But what are we going to do to move forward because it has happened? We begin to evaluate, who did the trauma make me think and believe I am versus who I really am. So those things, once you begin to deal with that, it can help you redefine your identity. As a Christian, we redefine our identity in Christ, so that now you can disconnect yourself or disassociate yourself from the thing that happened to you versus what you are currently experiencing, so that you can get to that love and connection that you really desire in your marriage. And then the third thing I really want you to deal with that may be causing disconnection and a lack of desire for intimacy and sex in our marriage is unresolved issues. Listen, we can't pretend like infidelity, secrets, lies, mismanagement of money, mismanagement of time. We can't pretend like those things didn't happen. That maybe one of us have a issue with credit cards or have an issue with alcohol, and we keep trying to have these conversations with our spouse, and our spouse refuses to do it. That is going to cause a disconnection in the way of intimacy and sex. And so what we can't do is make the issue that is unresolved. We can't force our spouse to make that, well, you don't ever want to have sex with me anymore. You've cut me off. First, we don't want to use our sex as a weapon, but we do need to understand that where there is unresolved issues, there is very hard, particularly for women, not all, but particularly for women, to want to be intimate. Now, what I've heard gentlemen say is women, when we attack their character, when we are disrespectful to them, when we are not vulnerable, or when they're vulnerable and we use that against them, it's very hard for them to want to be intimate with us, to want to trust us with their intimacy as well. So we want to deal with those issues that are unresolved, so that, the Bible talks about Adam and Eve was naked and unashamed. That is the goal. That is the desire for marriage, that we can learn to be naked and unashamed. So, one, I want you to, if you're young and you're dealing with not desiring your spouse, check to see if it's maybe the birth control that you're taking, or if, if there's some medication that's happening, there's some internal stuff going on. Two, if you're in that phase of, where the children are young, be intentional about making special time for you and your spouse, where you take and send the children to grandma, grandpa, aunties, uncles, someone you need, someone to help you, to assist in that area so that you can be free to still be husband and wife and not just mom and dad. The third thing I talked about, and I really encourage you to do the work if you need it, if you have experienced any type of sexual trauma growing up, or any kind of trauma, because it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual for you to have the need to kind of withdraw, retreat, or withhold the desire for intimacy. And it's not, maybe your withholding is not about your spouse, but it's about you. Maybe you can't handle the intimacy, or you don't believe you're valuable enough for it. So do the emotional work required, again, through a therapist or coach. Just get help. And then the last thing I mentioned was dealing with unresolved issues. Please, learn to communicate about those things that are hard to talk about, so that there's not wedges between you all, causing you to not find love, sex, and intimacy within one another. And now you maybe either looking outside of it or just not connecting in that way. I want you to have a beautiful, healthy, vibrant, extremely sexual marriage. And I know that you can. But I need people to be aware that these are some of the things that can cause it. And as we get older, husbands and wives, understand when your wives are going through menopause. That's another thing. It's kind of like the birth control. It can shut us down. But we don't have to give up. We can all do the work. There are natural herbal things you can take, particularly ladies in menopause, that can really help you deal with the hot flashes and get your libido back going, if that is an issue. So I hope this video bless you. Thank you for watching. If you are ready to do deeper work for your marriage, I want you to go to my website, verythoughtfullife.com, and sign up for my course, Think Your Way to a Better Marriage. The course. And so if you have any questions about that, feel free to inbox me. I would love to talk to you about it. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.